Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and this is a topic I covered well over a year ago back when I had a much smaller audience, and several people actually tried it and thanked me for it because they weren't aware of it, and they just wanted to try something a little more simple and a little different, and it worked fantastic. And it's something that I like to cover every now and then, these sort of things that go back to the older era before things got complicated. And a lot of people like to say things like, well, Jason, since the 50s, 60s, 70s, we've learned a lot about training from exercise science. And that is true for sports, but what we've actually found is that for hypertrophy, gaining muscle size, it's not that difficult. It doesn't require very much complexity. Most of the complexity and periodization of things that we use are to make professional level athletes in terms of performance. The actual programs needed to gain muscle at maximum rates are actually fairly simple, and a wide variety of methods all seem to produce somewhat similar results. The variations are pretty small as long as some basic guidelines are covered, such as enough workload, volume, frequency, recovery, things like that are hit. And one of the old school methods that a lot of the guys used back in the 50s and 60s to get really big, back before they had access to all the drugs that we have today, guys had access to drugs but nowhere near what guys use today, and yet they still got massive, and even natural guys got pretty big back then. And they didn't have access to all the Russian periodization yet. All the modern training that we use in the Western world now, we basically stole from the Russians and built off of. They were way more advanced than us in terms of training programming during the Cold War. And after the Cold War ended, we got access to a lot of their notes and everything, and we progressed from it. So what these guys knew was that they needed progressive overload, because it's the old story of Milo of Croton going all the way back to ancient Greece. Everyone has known for thousands of years that progressive overload is the key to getting bigger and stronger. We've known that forever. The civilized world has known that since ancient Greece. But what they tried to do was find a method to let them consistently progress. And what a lot of the old school guys did, and it worked really, really well. And it was very simple. It didn't require much math or any of the complex periodization we have today. What a lot of them would do for their peak sets, their heaviest sets on all their exercises, they would start with a weight that they could comfortably do 5 heavy reps with. And once they could do 5 reps, they would try to get 6. And then when they could get to 6 reps with really good form, without any form breakdown, getting either to failure or very, very close to muscle failure, they would keep increasing reps with the same weight until they got to 10 reps. Because generally what most people have found historically, the 5 to 10 rep range is generally pretty close to the easiest rep range to gain muscle mass in. It's a very efficient rep range. As long as you have progressive overload, it works really well for gaining size. Not saying you can't gain size effectively on more or less than that, but that seems to be kind of the easier range to do it in. And what a lot of these guys found was that if they stayed in that range, they did well, but they needed to train with heavy enough loads to get good metabolic fatigue, and then combine that with progressive overload. So when they would get to the 10 reps with that weight that was originally, well, they could only do it for 5 or 6 originally, when they got to where they could do 10 reps without using bad form, crappy form, technique breakdown, and grind out that 10th rep, they would increase the weight about 10% or so. And then drop back down to 5 reps and repeat the process again, just over time, so that again, you would increase reps with your basically 5 rep max until you could get strong enough to do it 10 times, at which point you've gained a lot of muscle mass. You take a weight that's heavy for 5 reps and you get strong enough to do 10 reps with it, you're going to grow. You're not only going to grow, but you're going to get stronger, because you're getting stronger through that range. It is a really efficient range for putting on size. Then you add weight, use your newfound strength to slowly increase workload again, because that's what happens. You're working with a strength again, quite a bit of strength to work in the 5 rep range, and then you build workload off of it. And again, when that workload comes up, your size and strength comes up, and you repeat the process over and over and over. And guys could do this who didn't know a lot about training. They didn't know a lot about math. They just had to put in the hard work and progress using a fairly efficient, simple system. And a lot of guys would say, oh, even trying to figure out 10% is hard. Not really. You don't even need to do math for that, because it doesn't have to be 10%. Just 10% or a little over, which means if you're using about 100 pounds up to about 150, throw 10, 15 pounds on when you get to the 10 reps. If you're using 200 pounds or 250, throw 20 or 25 pounds on. If you're using 300 pounds, throw about 30, 35 pounds on. It's pretty straightforward. So you throw that much weight on there and drop back down to 5 reps and repeat the process. However long it takes is however long it takes. Now, that was the whole point with periodization methods, is that they let you get sometimes through those little plateaus faster. But the thing is, as long as you're getting sufficient workload, sufficient rest, food, everything else, you'll eventually push through those plateaus no matter what. It might not be quite as fast as with an advanced periodization program, but if you get stuck with 6 or 7 reps with that weight, eventually, as long as nutrition and rest and everything else are on point, and you give yourself enough time to recover, you'll eventually get to 8 reps with it. Eventually get to 9 reps with it. You'll push past it eventually, and then you keep progressing. And guys who did this on all their big heavy compound movements and put a big focus on their heavy compounds and then short everything up with isolation movements afterwards, just to kind of fill in the weak links and the gaps and things that maybe didn't get hit hard enough, these guys all got really, really big. It works really well, and it's a non-complex way to train. It's just a matter of just putting in some hard work on the heavy iron and progressing and just getting stronger and increasing workload over time. And it's just a very efficient and simple old school way to get big. And it's time proven. It's been proven for decades, for several generations, and quite simply, it just works. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.